All right, well, happy Monday. I almost said good morning. It's not the morning anymore. We had a busy morning here. So
we did have a busy morning, yes.
This is the afternoon, which is just as good of time as any to film this, I would say. And yeah, you did such an incredible job really getting all of the sides of the Prodigal Son story yesterday, which I think was a gift to all of us who were listening. So thank you for that. And I loved the painting being up there. I will say though, you didn't give us any update on your lawn. So how's that coming along?
Yes.
How's it looking?
I thought about giving you all an update, but on the practical side, I thought, okay, not everybody who's here for Father's Day would have been here for Mother's Day.
Yep.
Then I had to explain it, which I guess would have been okay. But the grass isn't growing very well.
Okay.
Because, well, we might say there's been a famine of sorts. There's been a drought.
Yeah, there has been no rain.
And
no rain.
It's not doing very well, so I thought,
rats.
This won't be a very great transition. People will be like, it still looks bad.
Yeah, so we'll just pretend that part didn't happen. I don't think we can trust Sean to cut that beginning section out of our time here, because he'll want to make sure everybody knows that your grass isn't coming back, but we'll just proceed.
I have no pride when it comes to my grass.
It's not your area of expertise.
I like to cut it,
which is fine.
My son's taken over that job, which is cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
So now I do the trimming.
Nice.
Yeah.
Tag team it.
We tag team it. It gets done in a third of the time. It's amazing.
Good job, Jake.
Many hands make for light work.
That is true. That is very true.
All right.
So the Prodigal Son story we talked through yesterday. It's from Luke 15.
Yes.
And actually, I might just be proving that I'm very uncultured, but I had never seen that Rembrandt painting before.
Okay.
Or heard about it, so I enjoyed the way that you tied to that and really like highlighted seeing each character of the story. But I thought that with our time, since it's much less than what you have for the entire sermon.
What? I think I have an hour for the sermon. They need to let me know that. But anyway, go ahead.
I think you had a good amount of time. We don't, unfortunately.
Yes.
So I thought we could press into probably the older son character in the story, just because I think that it's really easy to accidentally end up there. You know?
Yes.
It's easy to accidentally end up a younger son as well, but you're often more aware that you are that. That's right. When it's happening.
That's
you
a
know.
Good point.
But so the way that Jesus is posing this story, he's talking about, like important to remember, it is a story. It's a parable, it's not a true story.
That's right.
Which, as you get like wrapped into the story, it starts to feel like, oh my gosh, this really happened.
Yes.
It's Jesus telling a parable which is meant to communicate a lesson. And it was a massive bait and switch that he pulled on the Pharisees with it.
He was really trying to get their attention.
Yeah. So he used a whole bunch of like cultural things to do that. Do you want to just kind of give us a quick list of those? Yeah,
so some of the cultural things. Remember, a parable is a modern day story that has sometimes a surprising ending, as Zach talked about last week, but always for Jesus's parables, because other people can use parables.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus's parables have eternal meanings.
Yeah. Yep.
So here's the thing. We need to understand something about the context, because the year, let's say 30, 31, 32 AD, that's not modern to us.
No.
But we can read this and we can kind of get it, but there is a lot going on culturally. So, for example, the son going to the father and asking for his share of the estate. Now, I don't know if you've gone to mom recently or dad and said, can you give me, my share of the estate?
No, I don't, I don't do that on a regular basis.
So we get that would be what? You do what? But in that culture where it's a shame, honor based culture,
Yeah.
it literally would have been like saying, I wish you were dead.
Yeah.
So that would be one piece. The way he divided the way the younger son was able to get the money, probably selling it as a future, which we understand futures. Let's see. The younger son going off to another country. To us, we might hear, oh, my friend graduated from high school and she moved here or he moved here to another country. Might be like, wow. For them, it was offensive. Like, you don't leave the land of blessing to go waste your parents' inheritance.
Right. And there's a lot in scripture in the Old Testament, especially talking about, how the Jews were to live. And it was largely, don't go outside of our chosen race here. That's because the Lord has blessed us. And outside of this blessing, you're unsafe, you're unclean. It's not where you want to be.
Israel was the land. So he went somewhere else. And then we get that he squandered his wealth. That's not necessarily cultural. But then the severe famine, thankfully we've not had to experience that.
Right.
But there are people around the world today who do, and it's in the Old Testament. And I'll be honest, I was hesitant to use some of the graphic language of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But since it's there, and Jesus baked it into this parable, that's the thing that I want you to catch. Jesus painted the worst possible sinner that we could imagine. Like if you were to think of the worst possible sinner that you can think of, that's who this young Jewish
what's happening.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. Yep. So we've got this really terrible character that everybody knows they're supposed to hate.
Yes.
Right? Even probably the people who may have been listening to Jesus who could identify with that person, they also know they're supposed to hate this character.
Yeah, like the tax collectors who may have been hearing this story probably were like, what's wrong with this young guy?
Yeah. So really terrible figure. The Pharisees think they know what's coming next because they think they know all of the things.
That's right.
And I do sometimes feel like, the Pharisees, they were doing their best. I think it's hard because
we're hard on them.
We're really hard on them.
Yeah.
Which we know we need to be because we know what Jesus often said about how they were living. But the Pharisees were living in the way that they thought was God honoring, which almost gives me this weird empathy thing for the Pharisees, even though they're typically the bad character of whatever story Jesus was telling. But I think that I end up feeling that empathy because I think that we so often accidentally find ourselves living in similar ways.
Absolutely.
As the Pharisees, right?
That's exactly right. That's the thing. In our culture, who would be most like the Pharisees?
Right.
A lot of people would say, well, from what I know, I guess people who work at churches.
We're the church leaders.
That's right. We're the religious leaders.
Yeah.
We don't call ourselves that, but of our day.
Yeah.
So it is scary. It has a profound implication for those of us who work at churches and for believers in general. And I think really there's an older son syndrome.
Yeah.
If you were raised in the church, maybe you became a Christian at a young age, which is an awesome thing. Mm-hmm. But there is a danger.
Yeah. It's that Henry Nouwen quote you shared yesterday. It is clear that the hardest conversion to go through is the conversion of the one who stayed home.
That's right.
And we never actually find out if the younger son
Jesus doesn't tell
went
us.
in to the party. And I think that's how we know that really that older son is kind of the main point maker of the story.
That's right.
Because it's almost like, here you go. This is your character.
Yes.
How are you going to respond? Are you going to come in, or are you going to continue to pout outside about the things that appear different than what you feel is fair?
That's absolutely right. Another thing that would have been culturally striking, again, this may be culturally striking to us as well,
Yeah.
is that the father actually gave the younger son the share of his estate.
Yeah.
That would have been
Yep.
shocking to them because it would have been incredibly dishonorable.
Yeah.
There's a book by, it's called Prodigal God.
It's Tim Keller.
Tim Keller.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's an incredible book.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
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 I read it years ago,
Yeah.
but as I recall, the point of that book is, see, prodigal means when you spend something lavishly but almost wastefully.
Yeah.
Which we can say.
Reckless is actually
Yes.
a synonym in
There you go.
the thesaurus, which
Yes.
is a challenging word to say,
Yes,
but
it
the
is. Yeah.
thesaurus
Yes.
lists them as synonyms.
So that's why Timothy Keller, right,
Mhm.
named that book The Prodigal God,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you could argue the father spent recklessly on our behalf.
He did. Yeah, it's a easy argument to make,
Yes.
I think. Because what always strikes me is the father restored the younger son
Yes.
to sonship,
Yes.
right? Essentially saying, you took a third of what was ours, you wasted it, come back, and now this 2/3, you're back in. Like, we're
That's
gonna
right.
put that into thirds again. Like, he not only just said, like, yeah, come on back, but, like, that was your inheritance. Like,
Yes.
you get... It was like, you're fully restored to sonship, so he would have been restored to, now he could receive the inheritance again, which the implications of that are just wild for us.
Yeah. So the father could have said, here's a plan of restitution,
Mm-hmm.
but he decided not to do that. He did what the New Testament calls reconciliation. Like,
Yeah.
it was, and there's a word in here that says, the father says, remember, in Jesus' story, this is a parable, is a modern story with an eternal meaning. So in verse 22, the father said to his servants, quick. And it's interesting because when we come to Christ, it may take years.
Mm-hmm.
However, in the moment we trust in Christ, it is instantaneous.
Yeah.
It is quick.
Yep.
It is right now that we are reconciled. And while there may be consequences,
Mm-hmm.
there's always consequences.
Yes.
I would imagine if Jesus played this out through the lens of the rest of the New Testament, maybe the older son experienced, I would think, consequences even in his own emotional being,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in terms of becoming a son, he was instantly, like you said, he
Yeah.
was, maybe we could say, reestablished
Yeah.
as a son.
Yep. He was. It just tears down any possibility for us to come to Jesus with the mindset of, I want to work my way
That's
into your favor.
exactly right.
Yes. Because this younger prodigal son came back with that intention.
Yes, he
right?
did.
And the father just said no.
Yeah.
But I think to kind of switch back over to the older son's perspective,
Yes.
of like, he was the same amount offended by his brother, probably more, because he was his brother, as what anybody listening to the story would have been.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, I think about the way that, like, growing up, my sister got a phone sooner than I did.
Right.
Growing up, right? I'm like, that's not fair.
Right.
Like, why she get a phone when she's 10? I had to wait till I was 11. Like,
That's
we
right.
do those things.
Absolutely.
And this is just like, no, you got to stop that.
Yeah.
Paints Jesus as, like, the perfect older brother, right? Because
Yeah.
older brother goes out, brings the younger son, his younger brother, back with him.
Yes.
And says, like, and that's what Jesus does
Yeah.
for us, which
Yeah.
that was a little bit of a window into a lot of what Tim Keller's book kind of
Yes.
talks about. But
Yes.
yeah.
And I love that, again, the whole premise in verses 1 and 2 that now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. I mean, we have Jesus' teachings, and of course, John says at the end of his gospel that if everything that Jesus taught and happened were written down, all the books in the world couldn't. So we don't have everything he said.
Right.
But we have what God wanted us to know.
Yep.
But his teaching was so compelling that what that society would have considered the worst of sinners, they were on their own choosing to want to be around him.
Yeah. And following and listening.
And listening and converting. It truly must have been amazing. And what do the Pharisees, what do religious people do when somebody who teaches their religion appears to be good-hearted, heals the sick, raises the dead, heals the blind, the deaf, the mute, and then all of a sudden they don't have a category for him.
Right.
Because he claims to be God. And now it's like, well, the only thing we know to do is say he's Satan.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. He switched his teaching. As soon as they said his teaching is of Satan, he switched to this, to parables. Because he said only people with faith could understand parables.
Yeah.
Really
Those who
nice.
have ears to hear, let them hear.
That's right.
One of the most commonly uttered phrases from Jesus.
That's right.
Oh, man. Well, I think I want to also just come back to, because ending our service yesterday with that time of reflection to think through the song Reckless Love, which was written so much based on Luke 15. So much of that song is
and whoever sang that did an amazing job.
Yeah. Whoever it was is definitely not sitting behind the camera now, the one filming us. But I think, thinking about that song, there's been a little bit of back and forth about whether or not
the word reckless
is okay. And I think, I was actually having a conversation with Phil after church, and we just were talking about, that God would love somebody like me. I do not deserve it. I'm a mess. It's reckless. And reckless doesn't equal unmeasured.
Right.
Reckless means...
Or unthoughtful, any of that. That's
means
right.
Just willing to go to any extreme, which he did.
Exactly right.
And he did for you as well.
Yes.
And for everybody on this planet, if they would choose to turn and come to him.
Amen. And I do want to end. Perhaps end. I don't know. It's your show.
I mean, it's not. It's all of us. So let's end here.
I just want to say that many times the younger son is like the main character and the love of the father.
Yeah.
But the older son, as we've been talking about, Jesus was really, he loved them too. He went out at that father. I'm fascinated by that. He left the party and went out to try and plead with the older son to come back. And I do think for those of us who have grown up going to church, we can have that older son syndrome where we kind of shake our head and wag our finger. And we have to be really careful about that.
It is challenging and convicting, because I think we often look at people that we feel like God went out and went to extreme measures for to bring back into his family. We don't realize that even though we've been following Christ for a long time, he's still willing to come out for us.
Absolutely.
When we become the one through our pig-headedness, no pun intended.
Nicely done.
Through our stubborn lack of grace for others, he's still coming back. It's equally, if not more, sinful, but we receive no less grace.
That's right.
So
we equally need grace.
Yes.
An old saying is, yet by the grace, but for the grace of God, there go, something like that.
Something like that. But for the grace of God.
But for the grace of God, there go I.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's us. And that's the older son. And we need to, those of us who have known Christ maybe for a significant amount of time, we need to realize that's who this parable is primarily leveled at.
Yeah. Yeah. So, on that convicting note, let's end there. We don't often end on a challenging spot, so I think it's okay.
Okay, good.
We'll just end on a challenge of do some reflection. Are you older brothering right now? And if so, what needs to shift?
And we got more parables coming up this summer.
So many more parables, which will be really fun. Yep. All right. Have an awesome week. And yeah, we'll see you on Sunday.
See you later.